Okay, so now I thought I'd show you guys a little bit of how I do my ear workflow. We've got a pre-made mesh here that's quite good for ear areas, and we can just sub it up to about level 3. So this is the one I've always been using with 130,000 polys. Now for the ear, we are going to be needing probably a little bit more than this, but for starters we can just use this sort of low, fairly medium res sort of a mesh. So I'm just going to take off those polys. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is use the wax. So I'll be using the wax a lot in a lot of these things, and we're going to control click, and you can sort of see how that's going to come in and come into the mesh. Now I'm just sort of like freehand eating out a bit of a round circle here, so we just want to come in and use that wax tool a little bit like this. Now my brush is really strong here, so just sizing that down a little bit, and I'm going to come in here and sort of just wax in a little bit of that first round circle of the ear. Now this is a bit of a formula that I sort of created after making a few ears and getting frustrated that I wasn't nailing the ears. So you can sort of see me working down this waxy area here. Now just smoothing it out a little bit to make it not so waxy. So I'm always using the wax tool and then smoothing it back a bit, because it does make a little bit of a meal of the mesh. Now the next step is to get this helix happening. So eyes have these sort of helixes, and if we bring down the brush a little bit, you can sort of see that area is a bit raised, and it comes around and sort of comes through, and it's going to come back into the middle of the ear like this. And this is a bit of a formula, so ears do sort of tend to always do this sort of a shape. Of course there's lots of variation on how they do it, but this is sort of like in the ballpark. So now again using the smooth tool just to smooth that back a little bit. At this stage I'm not too worried about getting a perfectly smooth mesh, I just want a sort of rough idea about what's happening. Okay, so I could even come in again now and eat out that area. Ears do have a very hard line there, and it sort of even underlaps. If you want to go for a perfectly high-res ear in this sort of an area, it's really quite a harsh line. So the next thing is we've got, so first step is the circle, second step is this helix just coming in this way. The third step is we want to kind of, I call it a peanut shape. We want to make like a little bit of a peanut shape here, right underneath the helix. And that's sort of like, this area here is actually where the ear hole is, and that's where it goes inside of the head. So we can sort of bring here, and this part here is sort of like the raised little area, and it depends where you want to put it. We might want to move this around later with the move tool. So after I've made some of this stuff, sometimes I will like bring it back or move it around to different locations. So you can do that as well. But here we're just coming in and using the wax tool again, eating into that area with a little peanut shape. And of course we can make that quite deep, because that is the hole, especially right there, that is going back right inside of the head. So just make that a really sort of deep hole and cave out that area there. Okay, so first step is a circle, second step is a helix, third step is this peanut shape. Now what I do is sort of like follow a line around this sort of indenting area of the helix and carve a semicircle around with the control. So we're again in the wax, and I'm just keying that and just eating it in a little bit, and eating down a bit of a deep sort of a crevice there inside of that ear all the way around. So it's sort of just like a little half semicircle shape, and that's it. Nice and easy. We can smooth it off a bit on that side, but the ear does sort of have this sort of an area. Now it doesn't just stop like that here. This part of the ear actually goes down and sort of spirals in, so I just smooth that off a little bit so it sort of comes down and into the ear. You can see that there. Clean that up later, and we're almost there. We're almost got a fairly good looking start of an ear. But the last step is simply to make this fork. So ears sort of have a bit of a fork here in this, and I'm using the wax tool just normally again, and we're bringing out, and see that there's this fork here. So I got sort of bringing this area out, and sometimes this area can protrude even more so than the outside of the ear. So you can really work that area if you want. In some ears there is a little bit of there's quite a lot of variation in the ears. They're quite easy because you don't have to get them sort of smack on, and you can sort of see it sort of comes and sort of ends here. So there's the basics of the ear right there. Now this is the time that I come in with the move tool now and just move some stuff around. So perhaps we want that a little bit thinner, not so fat. Perhaps we want to move that up. Perhaps we want like a little bit of a sharp sort of a point there, like more of an L veneer or something like that. Perhaps we want to just add a little bit of a, you know, diversity, screw it up. You can also like pull down the earlobes or have no earlobes depending on your character. Use reference, of course. I'm going a bit freeform here today, but usually I'd have the reference up so you can make a little bit more of an indentation for the earlobe. Of course, smoothing that back a little bit too. And we're getting into not a bad sort of an area just rather quickly with this fairly low res mesh. If I switch the mesh on, you can see we don't have hundreds of thousands of polygons here. Now another thing that I like to do is sort of come onto the front view, and you'll see that this mesh, the ear actually like really goes in, so that area really does have a bit of a 3D effect and sort of spiral down into the inside of the ear, so you really can push that quite some way in. So just pushing that with this with the grab tool, and now I'm just going to come back and smooth off this areas a little bit, and we can, this area really I like it to go sort of up more, so we can bring that around, keep that area there, and I might at this stage even up res just a little bit. So we're going to go one more level, come to 500,000 polygons on this mesh, just so I've got a little bit more detail to play with. So now that I'm here, I want to start cutting in some areas, and we can keep working with our wax brush a little bit. So holding the control key down, just working out in some of these forms. There's a hole, we can make it go further. There we go. We can get some of these sharper lines happening around here. We can, maybe that line should be a bit sharper. Maybe we really want to accentuate this sort of fork, so getting that sort of happening here with the wax. The wax is just a beautiful tool because it layers up your brushes really nicely. So smoothing out that area, smoothing out the ear, and this area in here we could do with a bit of smoothing as well. Alright, so now we got to that. This is when I come across to my Sculpt tool. Make sure we've got the VDM stamp, the Vector Displacement Map stamp, the very last one, V wrinkle on, and this is where I can use it to sort of come in and start to sharpen up some of these shapes. So I'm coming in here with that Vector Displacement Map and just drawing in around this crease to sort of sharpen up that sort of an area, and you can sort of see here, I would actually even want to follow that around a little bit. It's getting a bit fat here for my liking, so move it a bit backwards that way. That's it. Brush tool, maybe just push that back, it wouldn't be so fat as that. Something like that. Again, we can use it here for this area, just getting in a nice sharp, like that's our kind of our V area. Now I've sort of stuffed that up a little bit, but with ears they're quite forgiving, you don't have to get things exact. We can cut in around that area to get that sort of like nice shape happening. Again, smooth that area out. Now this area I want it to be a bit sharper, so I'm using the control key to sort of come in and knife the reverse out to get that sort of that happening. You can sort of see that happening there. Just smooth off this area. Wax tool again, just building up that area. Got a little bit deleted, smooth it off. So it's this combination of using a lot of smoothing keys. Wax I'm still in again. Now the polys aren't great in this area, so we're just sort of working with it. Alright, now back to the knife, the Sculpt with the VDM on it, and we're just coming in and just grabbing around there, and this area here again coming down and really sort of like starting to get that to work nicely. You can see how beautifully this tool works. It's really quite a good one. We can really use this to harden up our forms, get some of this sort of stuff happening and really harden up our shapes. And even around here we can sort of see, you might want to harden that up, just smooth it off a bit. So a combination between hardening things up and then smoothing them off really does tend to work quite nicely. So there we go, that's at a pretty good level. Finally, use the pinch tool. So the pinch tool can just come in here, and we can use quite a small brush, and it's pinching these areas and just making them really hard and getting rid of all these sort of weird artifacts that are happening. Come in that zone and really just working these areas. So I'd work this a lot more if it was a realistic ear, but this is sort of good enough to get a good start happening. Again, look at your reference, all that sort of stuff. Come in here, we could really harden out some of those areas. I'm not liking some of that form inside of the ear there, but we're now just using that to sharpen it up a little bit. And from a distance, you can see we've really got quite a nice ear there. Even that probably is a little bit too much, so I'm just smoothing that back a bit. We can smooth back certain areas here just to give it a bit more of an organic shape. And we pretty quickly have built a nice ear. Now you could go to the back and do a lot more work there, but there you go. That's a nice formula for building an ear with a few different tools in Mudbox, and it works quite nicely.